All these are just basic maps and basic histories. Nobody who watches my video series can claim to know everything that I know, because obviously I'm just breezing through this and not really touching on it anyway. So we go into the history of the Native American tribes. Okay, so around 60,000 to 25,000 years ago, lowering sea levels created the Bering Land Bridge. And you had cultures like the Clovis culture. And later on you had Alaskan Indians like the Inuits, etc., etc. And then you had the Paleo Americans, the early Americans. And then when they did the examination of the Clovis materials from the Clovis culture, and they used carbon dating, of course, they got around 11,000 years ago. Okay, so which is roughly about 9,000 BCE, 9100 BC, or 9,100 BCE. Now we go on to the different cultures. Like, remember they had Folsom Prison? Well, he had a Folsom Indian culture, which they like to make weapons and projectiles. It's interesting because that's what the Mexicans in Folsom Prison do. Some of the descendants of the Native American. Anyway, we go on to the ancestors of the Athabascan culture, which became the Navajo and the Apache. All those famous tribes you see in TV. A lot of this information I got from nativehistory.com, even some of the pictures from Wikipedia. Let me go on. Well, obviously I was familiar with it to a certain extent already. We go on to the woodland period, and then you had the places like the Missipean culture. Now, some of you are foolish enough to compare a city which wasn't nearly as massive as the Great Pyramid, but its foundation was big. So what? There was many cities throughout history that had big foundations. Also, it's important to notice that the Native Americans had Woodhenge. So, Europeans had Stonehenge, Native Americans had Woodhenge, Chinese had Great Wall. What does this show you? This shows you that the source was Africa, and the people who either stole the knowledge or took it with them built an inferior version of Egyptian masonry in their own country. Okay? In order for them to compare their structures, they have to compare a whole city to the pyramid. Okay? They have to compare all their works collectively to one small patch of land in Egypt. They have nothing that compares to the Nile. They have nothing that compares to the hieroglyphics. They have nothing that compares to the war arts. They are a new people. And even though they were new, the Asians were so out of touch with their own history that they didn't know that there was Native Americans right next to them, right there in Alaska. They didn't know. Here they are in Russia. Here they are in Asia. Here they are in North Korea and Vietnam, and they didn't know that right fucking next to them was thousands and millions of fucking people. So you're telling me the people that didn't know that most of their family was right fucking next to them are the smartest people in ancient history? Please. They're morons. That shows you they're blind. It isn't just because their eyes are stretched out that they can't see. They are spiritually blind. Their compass is off. They don't even know they started in Africa. Most of them thought they evolved from dragons in Japan, or they evolved from Chinese people in China. They were in shock to find out that the earliest Asians were black. That's why the Native Americans had dark skin, because they descend from the Asians who were black when they went to Asia. Africans, Afro-Asiatic. Now, we go on to the 13th century, the Iroquois nation, who forced the Osage, the Ka, the Ponca, the Omaha to move. The Iroquois nation is how they put all the Africans in a nutshell. All the Native Americans in a nutshell. Then they go on to form the 5 civilized tribes, which were mixed with white and adopted white culture and even owned slaves. It's important to note that there was not only white slaves and Asian slaves, there was Native American slaves before the white man came. But when the white man came, Native American slavery evolved to a more harsh form of it. And same with Africans. Africans who were in Africa, they treated their slaves pretty good compared to the way white Americans did with their hangings, with their lynchings, not allowing them to read, etc., etc. Beating them, raping them, etc., etc. You wouldn't find that rape in Africa because it was too shameful for an African to have the kid of a slave. He would automatically become a slave too. So it's about 5 minutes. Well, this one I'm going to cut short because I've been having some problems with the YouTube recording, etc. I'm going to run through this real quick. You see the layout, British Columbia, Alberta, you know, Ontario, Quebec. You see how it's laid out. Mexico below us, and how we get to the Caribbean Sea, the Pirates of the Caribbean. You got Cuba, and you know, in that area you have all the islands and stuff. You got, you know, we got places like the Bahamas and Jamaica, etc. Okay, and then of course you have Haiti, and then you go down to South America, Venezuela, Peru, Brazil, etc. On and on. Now, Honduras, etc. Now, it's important to note. In this video, we're not talking about Colombia and the drug cartels here. We're not talking about Pablo and them. We're not talking about Chapo Guzman and them, and the Zetas and them. We're talking about the Native Americans, okay? We're not going to touch on the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Aztecs. The Olmecs were a lot more African-looking. They evolved into some of the Mayans and Aztecs. So if you look at the empires and the culture and the religion, it is African. The people are just the fools who were kicked out of Africa. Of course, I mean, no offense to them, because people can repent, but at one point, things came to a head, and the only one left in the holy ground of Egypt was the toughest Nubian people for like 100,000 years. Okay? So, when you understand that not only the Nubians, but the humanoids, the Cro-Magnons, you know, that would evolve into Nubians were already there in Africa, and the blacks stayed there. The first human migrations were ones that already had some kind of primitive religion and primitive tools. You have to understand that the people that would understand God are the animals. When man evolved from being an animal, and he took his animal religion with him and used his deductive reasoning to determine what is evidence of God, that's why Africans are closer to God than anyone else as far as their description of God and how things went and how everyone stole their ideas. Thank you.